Hello and welcome to the second edition of the Confident Momcast. My name is Tiffany Farley, and for those of you who might not know who I am, just going to do like a quick introduction before we get started. My name is Tiffany Farley. I am a maternity and newborn photographer currently located in Pittsburgh. And I have just had a ton of amazing conversations with obviously new and expecting moms over the years. And I'm not a mom yet myself, but I've always been really interested in the topic of motherhood, hence why that's my specialty as far as who I photograph and why. It's something that's really special to me. I work with a lot of amazing clients. And so just naturally in working with expecting and new moms, I have a lot of conversations on how was your birth experience? And everyone's experience is so unique and so different. And I have just learned so much. And so the Confident Momcast was really born out of this desire to create a community of conversation about it. And the most important thing to me was that it was done in a way that was not based on fear, because a lot of education on birth is based on fear. The decisions, they push you to make decisions based on fear. People are very one-sided. They're, biased. They, went through a certain experience, so they feel this way. Somebody else went through a different experience, so they feel this way. And so I'm going to be bringing on different moms, different birth and baby experts, and they're going to be sharing different opinions. It might be an opinion you've never heard before. It might be a perspective that you might not personally agree with. That might not have been your experience as a mom. But the whole point is to create a platform where these stories can be shared in a way that's safe, in a way that's comfortable and casual enough where we all just feel like we're kind of hanging out in the living room and just talking about somebody's experience and somebody's expertise. And so have had so much amazing feedback. The last episode was last week. And so you can go back and watch the replay on that. My friend Alicia joined me and she's really passionate about the topic of birth. And so she shared her birth stories. She had a C-section and she had a home birth. And so those were some really interesting perspectives to listen to. And she's really passionate about the fact that education on birth should not be based on fear. So that was a huge motivating factor in starting this. And so if this is your first time tuning in, this is going to be a weekly live video cast. So you can watch it here. Obviously, if you're watching, then you saw the registration process. And we're doing it this way just because I wanted you to have the opportunity to ask questions. So I know that, this is kind of an evening hour. It's going to be different every week, but for the most part, this is going to be around the time that we're going live. So if you have the chance to join us live, if you're watching the replay, next time, if you try to tune in live, you'll have the chance to ask questions. And so as we're getting started, if you have a question about anything that myself or Rylee, who I'm going to bring on in a minute, is going to talk about, feel free to write it in the chat. You'll see a place where you can actually select it as a question mark. And that's really important because it actually allows us to point people directly to the answer of that question. So if you have a question, just mark it with a question mark. I'll be able to pull them up. And towards the end, we'll go back through and we'll answer as many of those questions as we can. So feel free to write in your questions in the comments. Mention anything that you're curious about. I'm going to bring on Rylee. We're going to get started. Real quick, let me just mention, because I forgot last week, there's a couple of things. So you should see a button below this video that says join the Facebook group. If you're not a big social media user, if you're in one too many Facebook groups, don't feel like you have to join, but it's just going to be an open group. It's a closed group, but just an open group for all of you watching. If you want to join, you're going to get updates about episodes and you'll get reminders when we're going live and kind of stay connected that way. And also you'll get to meet new and expecting moms. And so we're just really hoping that community grows, just as a safe place for you to kind of build community with other new and expecting moms and other people who are interested in fear-free and encouraging birth stories. So feel free to join the Facebook group. And then also, one of my favorite ways to watch, so this is hosted on what's called Crowdcast. My favorite way to watch it is through their app. So if you're on your computer and you're thinking like, man, it'd be nice to watch this on my phone. If you're an Android user, I believe you can watch it on your phone seamlessly, but iOS hasn't quite caught up yet. So there's a free app and it's called Crowdcast. You can download it on your phone, and all you have to do is look up my name, search Tiffany Farley, and you'll find the Momcast channel. And so that's just my favorite way. It's kind of going to be this library of archived episodes where you'll be able to go back and watch replays. You can watch us live. You'll get notified on your phone whenever we go live. And it also, my favorite feature, which I wish Facebook Live would do this, is that when we're going live and we're having a conversation and you exit out of the Crowdcast app, the audio will keep playing just like a podcast. So you can respond to text messages or answer that email or whatever it may be and still stay tuned in, which is something that I really appreciate. So all of the housekeeping announcements are done. I'm going to bring on my friend Rylee. I met Rylee through a photography workshop. So Rylee is a photographer as well. And I met her through a workshop that I've been hosting. We've been hosting it together for this is going to be our 5th year this fall. So I met her through her photography work online. And actually the very first workshop that we hosted, she had just found out that she was pregnant. She was newly pregnant at that first workshop. And so over the years, I've been able to watch her. She's a mama of 2 now, and she's going to be sharing her birth stories and just some education on a subject that she's really passionate about when it comes to emotional and spiritual support in, the birth experience, and going to be sharing about, the different roles, the different ways you can prepare yourself, prepare your birth team, whoever that may be, whether it's your husband, whether it's a doula. So I'm really excited to share everything that she has. So let me just bring her on, and I'm going to have her introduce herself and kind of share. Here's Rylee. Rylee, if you just want to share a little bit about your family, how old your little ones are, just so people can kind of get an idea and get to know you a little bit better.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to share these stories. I'm thankful to have stories to tell. And I'm thankful to be here with Tiffany. I love Tiffany. My name is Rylee. I am a photographer. I've been a photographer for about, I guess I'm going on my 10th year of shooting weddings. And so I've been doing that, and it's cut back a little bit since I've had little ones. And that's the fun thing about photography. They have the flexibility to do that. But yeah, I'm a photographer. I'm located in Alabama, and I've been married for 6 years. I have a 3.5-year-old and a 16-month-old, almost 16-month-old. 2 little boys, Wilkes and Ollie, and I'm married to Andrew. I had a fun way of finding out that I was pregnant. I took a pregnancy test, threw it away in the trash, thought that I wasn't pregnant, and then on my wedding anniversary, a week later, I looked in the trash and I found out that there were 2 pink lines. And so that was my wedding anniversary, second wedding anniversary to my husband. And that was really fun. Second time around, my husband was totally surprised about Ollie. So that wasn't quite the same. He was excited, but he was totally surprised. I, on the other hand, knew that I was pregnant. I was excited about it. But anyway, so we found out we were pregnant, and I had probably spent, I don't know when I started educating myself on birth, but I feel like it was really interesting to me. So before I was pregnant, I was interested. And I remember my health was really important even before I conceived. And so that was my focus, preparing for that. And I continue to focus on eating well and exercising throughout my pregnancy. And along with those ways that I prepared watching things like this, consuming as much encouraging information on birth as I could, and just getting testimonies from other women that this was possible. Obviously, it's possible for how many years it's happened, but that this was something that I could totally do. I just needed to know that I could do it. And so when I found out I was pregnant, I continued to just be a collector of stories, and was really encouraged by every book that I read and every story that I heard. And this is why I'm just so excited that Tiffany's offering this space, because it's so important to just build your faith, that there are a crowd of people around you, whether you know anybody personally or not, that have done this and they're supporting you. And I think that's really Tiffany's heart for this, is that it's just an encouraging place for moms who are going after something for the first time, or maybe this is your second time and you want it to look differently than it did the first time. But anyways, I love this. I'm thankful for this, and excited to share my stories. So going into Wilkes's birth, I chose to have a natural birth, and I didn't know anybody really that had done it. And I had 2 acquaintances that had natural births, and my only conversations with them were, "Oh, you had a natural birth. Wow, awesome." And that was all. So I didn't get to talk about how they prepared, their experience, like reality of what that even feels like physically, emotionally. So that was pretty much going into my pregnancy, my only education, or my only personal experience with knowing anybody who had natural births. Trying to think. So that's when my research began, and my search for other people that I could talk to personally. And I think I met with 1, maybe 2 people. Yeah, 2 people. But one, I actually got to hear story. She had 3 babies. I think she had 2 babies before me, and she was pregnant at the same time as I was. And she had told me about her birth stories that were fear-free, pain-free. And it just opened my eyes to something that I didn't know was possible, that it didn't have to be a really, really difficult process, and it's something that I could feel really confident going into. She recommended this book called Supernatural Childbirth. It's a Christian book, and I read it, and it had really encouraging testimonies in it, as well as things like declarations and prayers and scripture. I read it. I think, as with any book, there's things that I agreed with, things that I didn't agree with. So going into any book that we talk about or recommend, know that. But it was really encouraging, and I just studied a lot, prayed a lot, prepared my heart a lot for something that I knew could be a really stretching and exciting experience for me personally, but also between my husband and I. And I just really look forward to that. So I had a doula with Wilkes's birth. With Ollie's, I didn't. And I can kind of share a little bit about how that looked differently between both births, or why I made that decision. But with Wilkes' birth experience, one of the things I just didn't know. I'm a modest person. Like, I was even thinking about it today. Both times the nurses were like, "You're so modest." And so most people come in here and they're like, "Let's just have the baby and I'll do anything." But I laugh about the things that I did I just wanted to stay to myself. And so I didn't even know, would I feel comfortable having somebody like a doula that I didn't know that well, but we came to know each other in the process, and she felt like a sister in the moment, which I think is just a really cool thing, that that you can create this really close relationship just through the really intimate experience, but with no other background. So if you have any fear of I need to get to know this doula before I really can feel comfortable, have no fear. That happens in the moment. And going into it with Wilkes, I knew that I wanted a doula. I was at a hospital for both of them, but I was at a different hospital for Wilkes. I had the best care that I could get at the time that I knew was available. And I had a doctor who they called Mr. Midwife or Dr. Midwife. And so I had the best care that I knew was possible, that I had available, but the hospital itself didn't have great statistics on supporting natural birth. And so I knew that I wanted a doula to be there as support because I didn't know, one, I had a large on-call group of like 30 doctors, so it could have been anybody, not my doctor. And also, I didn't know if I would have a nurse that would be supportive of natural childbirth. It worked out really well that I had a doula because I didn't have a nurse that was super supportive of natural childbirth. And so, had I not had that support, I don't know what kind of support I would have had. But
how did you find your doula? Was she somebody that you knew, or was it somebody that like was recommended by a friend? Because I think that's like a big question, is if somebody's interested in maybe having a doula, like where does one even, like, do they just do an internet search? I'd asked Alicia this as well, and she had gone with somebody that she knew that somebody else had used. Or what would you recommend if somebody's interested in working with a doula? Like where did you go, or did you know them beforehand?
Yeah, I didn't know. Her name was Allison Miller, and she's in Birmingham, Alabama. I didn't know her beforehand. I had friends who knew that she was a doula and that just loved her as a person and thought that she'd be a great fit. I had another person that I had in mind, but just because I didn't have that personal reference, I went with Allison because I did have that. So I didn't know anybody who actually had given birth with her as a support, but just knew them or just knew her personally. And that meant a lot to me just to know her as a person. But the reason I was looking at the other doula as well was because I was able to get online and look at testimonies from other moms and spoke highly of her and the experience that they had with her. So that means a lot to me, to be able to read personal testimonies online or to hear them in person. So that's how I found her, just through friends. Let's see. So with Wilkes, going into it, this was my first time having a natural birth, and then also my husband's first time, and we were going into it just not knowing. I just remember thinking, like, can I do this? I didn't want to shout it that I was going to try a natural birth because I had friends who had wanted to and then didn't. But it was different circumstances. They didn't have a doula, and I'm not sure how much preparation going into it they had put into it. But let's see, going into Wilkes' birth, preparing Andrew, he wasn't one to read all the books cover to cover, but he was willing to read any of the things that I kind of bookmarked and said, hey, this would be something that you might want to know, or this is why I'm choosing to do this, or this is how you can help me. And so he was willing and available. He wasn't gung-ho, but he was totally available to help me in any way possible. And then I made it really clear to him the different things that I felt physically would be helpful, whether it's remind me to drink water, or these essential oils would be helpful, or whatever. And so I made a whole list, and that was really helpful for him to have, because when he was just like, what do I do? What do I do? He read the list, got some ideas, would come up to me, whisper in my ear, like, is there anything, like, what about this? What about this? Things that I forgot or I would forget as well. Excuse me. So that was really helpful. And then I prepared personally with declarations. I prepared declarations, meaning things that I was just speaking words of encouragement and power and confidence and trust in the process. And just reminding myself that I can do this. and I had all the help that I needed to do it. And then
did you listen to anything? Like Alicia had mentioned that she had listened, she had like it was like hypnobirthing, but it was at least at her second birth, because I was there for it, and it was either soft music, like it was the option of like just soft music, or it was things that I think the track was actually kind of like declarations in a way, where it was just kind of like, you were designed to do this. You were like, was just like building her confidence. Did you listen to anything, or did you choose not to listen?
Yeah, I did. I love when I'm talking with other moms, encouraging them how to prepare for birth. One of the big things is making a song list and declarations. So I had a playlist that also had declarations on it. I don't remember sitting and like meditating on the declarations that were being spoken over the speaker as much as I remember the songs. And I chose worship songs and songs that I felt like were just full of truth and hope and encouragement. And those were really special to me. So I highly recommend having a playlist, whether you have a natural birth, a birth with an epidural, or a C-section, having that in your ear and just reminding you of truths. Or, you know, if choosing songs that are more like what you'd listen to while you're working out, like pump yourself up, you can do this kind of songs, those are great too. So whatever your song choice is, it's really helpful to have that in your ear. But at the same time, everybody's different with what they prefer. If you want complete silence, that might be the route. But I think preparing for whatever that looks like, I think it's surprising. I was surprised that I didn't like laboring in water as much as I thought it might be helpful. So it's just being prepared and having these things available. And then you might decide once it comes to birthday that you don't want to do that, and that's totally fine. So I had in my bedroom when I was at home before I left the hospital, I had printed tons of scripture and truths and things that I knew that were true and wanted to be reminded of all over the place. I had Wilkes's name and meaning of his name on the wall as well, because it meant his name means protector and the Lord is my God. And I was like, we're in this together. Like, we're going to be protected and the Lord is my God. And just having things like that as a reminder was so helpful to me. And so whatever you find to be things that you need to be reminded of, prepare in advance, because in the moment, there's so much going on. We were thinking about tracking contractions and when we need to leave for the hospital, and do we have all of our things packed last minute? So all of that, prepare in advance for music, for your words of encouragement, and your list for your husband. I had a birth plan. We had that ready to go. And that way my support was able to be on the same page. So all of that was really important. So I had a doula with Wilkes. I didn't with Ollie. Second time around was different. Like I said, with my first birth, I was in a hospital with a doctor that I trusted, but didn't know if I would have supportive staff. So I had a doula because I really felt like that was necessary. Second time around, when I had Ollie, I moved hospitals to Princeton, which is in Birmingham. We had, while I was pregnant, moved to Tuscaloosa, which is an hour away from Birmingham, but we decided to stay at Princeton. So we drove an hour, felt like it was worth it to make the drive. We just left early enough second time around. Funny story, pretty much as soon as I went into labor, my in-laws made it to Birmingham before we even left the house to have the baby. And they made it and then had to drive back home because we had not had the baby in time for them to be there. I had them at 3 a.m. So they were ready.
Was it first grandbaby?
Okay. But my mother-in-law, her reason was her second birth, she had the baby within 2 hours, so she thought I was going to be the same way. She was like, "We're making it. You better come here." We're like, "We haven't yet, so what's going on?" But anyways, it was funny. So with Ollie, I didn't have a doula. My decision with that was I had a midwife at the hospital in Princeton, and I felt my chances of having great support there, and then also just Andrew second time around was just so much more prepared. My choice not having a doula was because I knew that Andrew Andrew knew his role and would do a great job, and I knew that also if I needed anybody else, my midwife was supportive with the decisions that I made, and I knew that the nursing staff was a lot more supportive. I knew that because just across the board, Princeton as a whole is supportive of natural birth. They only have 5 doctors, and all of them are on the same page with doing everything possible to support the mom in whatever birth that she's wanting to have. So I just had Andrew second time around, and he was great. We were able to be left in the room alone by ourselves, no nurses in the room. I think they came in towards the end and checked on us, and if we needed them, we were able to call them, but otherwise it was really peaceful and quiet, and it was just Andrew and I with the lights off, and just felt like we were at home. But I'll tell my stories, and then we can talk about the other things involved in support and that sort of thing. But let's see. So I'll start with Wilkes's and then move to Ollie's. So with Wilkes, I went into labor 1 week after my due date. And the minute that I had my first contraction, I knew that I was in labor. The week before, I thought this feels like a lot like labor, but then it wasn't, and it tapered off, but we never went to the hospital or anything. But this one felt different than that one. So I was like, I'm pretty positive that was just a real contraction. And so Andrew went into crazy mode and was like, okay, pack bags, we're ready to go. And then we're like, and then he was able to settle once he figured out that we got everything that we needed. But I went into labor, I think around 7 o'clock. I had spent the day painting a friend's house and had begged them to help me, or to let me help them. I was trying to go into labor. So I was doing anything possible. But that day specifically, I just remember waking up and just being totally surrendered to whatever birth that I was meant to have. I will have that birth, and I will just feel at peace about that, because the next day it would have been my 41st week appointment, and I was just really nervous that they were going to start talking about just other ways of having the baby. So so I had my first contraction at 7 p.m. We spent time. I took a bath, I journaled, highly recommend it. I love having that to look back on and read my words that I had that were just all over the place. My thoughts were just I remember crying. Andrew videotaped me as well. I remember crying that I wasn't going to be pregnant anymore. I was so just in transition mode of oh man, I just really enjoyed this season. And I know I'm going to really enjoy the next season, but it was just a weird place of knowing that within hours, just everything would be new. And so, I think, until about 11 o'clock, contractions were very manageable, walking around, really comfortable. And I think I remember at 11 o'clock, I was like, these I have to think through a little bit more. And then I called my doula at 2 a.m. and then we left for the hospital around 5. And I got there at 5. And thankfully, one of my closest friends was there as a labor and delivery nurse, and she had just worked all night. And she so graciously stayed there with me until I had Wilkes, which was at lunch that day. And so she was exhausted, but I was grateful to have her there. But let's see. So we got there at 5. And when we got there, I decided I didn't want to know when they checked me, just as I arrived, I didn't want to know how many centimeters I was. I hadn't been checked during my prenatal appointments either, because I feel like this is such a personal thing of how you feel like you would handle either disappointment or encouragement about where you are. And I knew that being checked didn't say a lot about how far you would, or how close you are to meeting the baby. My mother-in-law had been, she told me specifically, this is just what went into making that decision. She had told me that with my husband, she was 0 centimeters, and then the next day she had Andrew. And so I was like, I just don't want to get to a place where I'm mentally feeling like, oh, I'm 0 centimeters, it's gonna be forever, or oh, I'm 2 or 3, and then thinking it's gonna be soon, and then it's not. I had a friend who walked around 8 centimeters dilated for 2 weeks. So sounds like
Crazy.
this is all over the place with this. So I just didn't want to affect my mental state or my level of faith with knowing something like that, which wasn't going to tell me a ton. I felt. So when I got there, I didn't want to be disappointed if I was like 2 centimeters and felt like I had a million miles to go. And so I just decided not to know. Andrew found out. I was fine with anybody else knowing, but I just didn't want to know. Like later I found out. One of the really beautiful things that my doula did for me that I've done for friends when I've kind of stood in as a doula for them is she took notes. I don't know if this is typical for all doulas, but it was like, I had no idea she was even doing it or was something that I was able to receive later. I just didn't know it. So a few weeks later, she sent me like minute by minute different things that were happening. So we checked in the hospital at this time, you were this many centimeters dilated. At this time, you said you feel like royalty or something. I remember saying like, oh, I just feel like everyone's taking such good care of me. I feel like royalty. And I guess she thought that was funny, so she wrote it down. And so she wrote down different things that were, I don't know, I guess important details or non-important details, but just really sweet things. As well as, maybe if you don't have a video camera, having somebody even like recording those things that you say, or I didn't know the first thing that I said to Wilkes, but knew it because of what was on video or what somebody wrote down, which was, oh my gosh, he's real. It was a shock to me. And so things like that is really sweet. So when you do have support, whether it's your husband or somebody else or a doula, that's something that's really a cool thing to kind of notice. I would really love notes in whatever way, because the time just goes by. You totally don't have any idea how the hours go. Anytime I talk to another friend about her birth and I've attended, she'll be like, yeah, it seemed like from at 2:00, this happened. And then I had him at 3, and I was like, no, actually, the time gets way mixed up. It just goes by really fast. And so it's really helpful to have something like that. But anyways, so we checked in at 5. I was, I think, 6 centimeters when we got there. And I was able to go into the tub for water labor. We weren't allowed to deliver at the hospital. They don't allow delivering in the water, but I was able to do that. And I did that for about an hour. And like I said, it was, I wasn't fully comfortable in there just because I couldn't have Andrew with me. They didn't allow the dads to get in. So I was like, okay, well, let's get out. And I remember one of the things that I did with both births were, it's just funny for me, but I remember both times I was like, I'm just going to pretend like I'm not even here and just relax and I'm not even alive right now. I'm just sitting here, not even here. And And I told my friend that, who was in labor 2 months ago, and I was with her when she was laboring. I was like, this really worked for me. Try it. And she went from like huffing and puffing to just being like so relaxed. And so I guess you talked to Alicia about hypnobirthing or whatever. So if you're familiar with that, maybe that's something similar, but whatever, it worked for me. But I love to talk to people about contractions because I think the idea behind contractions is just so different than what I believe the experience can be. My mom, I remember her saying contractions felt like, "Arr," and I was like, I'm not looking forward to that at all. And that's what I feel like a lot of people, their experience or how they share stories of their birth and contractions and whatever is a lot of just pain and it just being not fun. And I always explain the process as being the hardest workout I've ever done, but like it didn't feel any harder than running a marathon. And I would way rather give birth than run a marathon. But I really felt like it was a lot of the same feelings as a workout, a really hard workout. So just in the way that you are lifting weights and your muscles are burning and you're feeling that, you wouldn't describe it as painful to lift weights. You wouldn't just, I just remember feeling like I was like hanging on the side of the cliff kind of thing. Like you're just kind of like holding on, because I was like holding on to the hospital bed, just like, but I really feel like that is a better picture of what labor felt like for me. The whole experience just felt like a really challenging workout and way more rewarding than any other kind of workout I've ever done. And like I said, I would way rather give birth every day than after run a marathon. I think runners out there, I admire you. I think it's amazing. But a lot of the same feelings, like totally, I mean, I think like the feeling of like getting a cramp when you're running, like it's a lot of the same feelings. But I mean, it's all muscles. So it's nothing to be afraid of there. And then with the actual delivery, I have no recollection of the feeling of Wilkes being born. That was just completely, I felt like the pushing stage was so much more enjoyable even than the contractions. I had at one point when I got close to delivery, they told me I wasn't allowed to push yet because I wasn't 10 centimeters. And so that was probably the most difficult part of Wilkes's labor, was knowing that I wanted to push because I had the urge, but they just told me not to. And that felt a lot like needing to throw up and not being allowed to. And I did that plenty during my pregnancy, actually, on a plane going to your workshop, needing to throw up on the plane. That was the only time I needed to throw up, was motion sickness and stuff like that. But anyways, that's what that felt a lot like. And that was really the most uncomfortable part, was just wanting to push, but just like having to hold it back. But otherwise, I felt like the contractions, I don't know. And you also ease into them in the beginning. You're kind of like, oh, these are contractions. And they start to get a little bit stronger and start to where you're like needing to like stand still and breathe. And then they get to the point where you don't want to really stand anymore. But I think it was such a relief to be to the position of we're pushing like at 10 centimeters. I really don't even, I think the contractions even felt more chill at that point. For whatever reason, it was like, once I got to 10, it was easy. But up until that point, it felt like a really hard workout and a marathon, in the way that like my labor with Wilkes was 17 hours and my labor with Ollie was 11 or 12, right? Or 13, around 12 hours. And, but yeah, so the other difficult part with Wilkes's was it was through the night. So Andrew's really tired, but I was actually sleeping between contractions. So that again kind of tells you my comfort level. I was able to sleep a little bit. And
would you say that, like, because you had, like, it was a lot of like your preparation was what made you able to be like relaxed? Because I know like so many people say that, and I think that's like a big premise of even that the book that you mentioned, Supernatural Childbirth, is how that the actual scientific connection between fear and pain. So would you say that like it was you going in like having like an understanding of like, I've never experienced this before, but I'm not afraid of this? And did that like help you? Did that like the mental preparation and even just like, the reading that you did beforehand, would you say that attributed a lot to the fact that it didn't hurt like you thought it was going, like other people had said that it would, because you weren't afraid?
Yeah, I definitely feel like if there was a moment that I started to feel like, do I believe that I can have this birth and it be, and the outcome be what I hope it to be? Andrew was there whispering in my ear truth. He was praying for me and reminding me of just what I consider facts. And so I think the preparation ahead of time, whether it was studying birth and being confident in that, or studying fear and just really knowing the truth about fear. And for me, it had everything to do with my faith, to be able to hold on to what I believed was just, I didn't need to have fear. And so, yeah, I think the preparation of my heart going into it had everything to do with how those moments played out, because I had Andrew, I had my doula doing kind of like back support, and then I had Andrew in my ear the entire time, and he would be praying, he would be just reminding me, he would be reading scripture, just encouraging, and I had prepared him in advance, saying these would be things that I would really need to hear going into birth. So let's see. So we got in the hospital at 5. We had him at 12. It was a great experience. Everything was just, I totally enjoyed it. And I remember as soon as I had him, I was like, let's do it again. That was great. With Ollie, I was really encouraged to hear somebody say, your faith grows each time. Like it doesn't have to be hard all over again. Like it's not like you're doing it all over again new. And you can really feel that way. Second time around with your pregnancy, there's some things that feel different or feel familiar and that you're familiar with, but really with each time you can have fear through your pregnancy, through the delivery, and through postpartum. Like there's multiple opportunities for fear in every situation really in your life. It's just a matter of holding on to truth and not giving into that. I had a friend I was talking to about fear not long ago, and she said she worries about everything. And she was saying, I literally have fear about everything, I feel like. And she said she was talking to a friend, and her friend said, oh my gosh, I fear the weather so bad. Like it's like so much anxiety over tornadoes in Alabama. You don't know.
No, there's been all these tornadoes in Ohio, which is right. I'm from Maine, so I'm not used to tornadoes, but they are. So everyone's been talking about tornadoes for the last 24 hours. So it's like really funny that you mentioned that.
Great. Well, so my friend was talking to this other woman, and her friend was saying, I really fear weather. And my friend said, I have literally never thought about weather being a thing. And she said just in that moment, she realized there was unlimited potential to be fearful about things. Like you can be fearful about anything, there are so many opportunities. It's your choice to be fearful about it or not. So I feel like with pregnancy, people don't mention the fear during pregnancy. You know, it's congratulations. How many weeks are you? When are you due? Is it a boy or girl? So many exciting things, and no one's really talking about the fear that goes through. Really, I feel like every time you go to the doctor, there's opportunity, because you're going from like, there's so many different things that you do with like tests, and even just anytime you go and you're just hoping to hear a heartbeat, there's so many opportunities, negative opportunities, to be fearful.
Yeah, sure.
So it's really just through your whole pregnancy, before you even are pregnant, you have to start out with truth and understanding that there's opportunity for fear, but you're not going to accept that, and you're not going to be one that falls for that, because even if worst case scenario happens, you're going to be okay, and your story is going to work out for your good. So anyways, going it really, there's so many times that you can be fearful throughout your whole pregnancy, and getting a hold of that fear before you even get to your birth. I feel like each time that you go to your appointment, each month that goes by is just practice for gaining confidence each time, and trusting that your body is doing as it's designed, and trusting that your story is being written the way that it's supposed to. And when you get to birth, you're fully prepared and fully confident that you can do this. Whatever the story looks like, you can do this. And just surrendering that. But with Ollie's birth, is that where I was going? Was that what I was going to talk about next?
You kind of jumping back and forth. But you didn't finish with Wilkes. So how did like the rest of Wilkes's birth go?
Well, I mean, that was pretty much, we had him at 12. I said that once he was born, the pushing part, I think I ended up delivering a lot of my labor. I laid sideways, and I felt really comfortable just like pretending I was sleeping. And then I remember feeling like, okay, I've got to get serious with this and like put effort into it. And I started off with, the next thing I did was get on the back of the bed, like have the bed tilted up, and just leaned on this way and kind of move my hips, and just try to give like, or just try to allow gravity to help me. And then I moved to, they had a bar on the front or the bottom, like the foot of the bed. They had a bar over it. And I then like got on the bar and started on my knees, and then just mentally, I was like, okay, I'm going to start on my knees. That seems easy. And I knew that eventually I wanted to be in like a squatting position in order for him to be born. I even remember saying it to my doula beforehand, that I felt like that was the position that I would probably deliver in. And so I got up, and just one knee at a time went up, and I was like, I can do this. And I feel like I had a mental block of feeling like there were people, I remember at one point just being like, we're close, but we're not that close. And they wheeled in like the newborn stuff, and my mom was like, look, like he's about to be here. Like that's important. Like the doctor's coming in. And I just remember thinking like, they're way overreacting. This is never happening anytime soon. Like, I don't know what they're doing. And it just felt like forever away, because it just didn't feel like it was going to happen that fast. And I had a mental block of just like being in that vulnerable position, and having other people in there. I was just like, couldn't get over it for a little while. And then once I was like, forget it, we're doing this. He was born, and it was just a really sweet moment of, I couldn't believe that a real size baby came out of me. I just remember thinking like, I don't know why, but mentally I was like, he's gonna be like the size of like a Coke can. Like, I know that makes no sense at all, but like in my head, I felt like he was gonna be like this big, and he was a real baby. And I was like, what? And so I didn't have tearing, but I had what they called a rug burn type of thing. Like, I guess it's just stretching. And so I did get a stitch. I was nervous going into that because I didn't have any pain medication, but that wasn't really difficult. It was probably one of the least exciting things, but I had my baby in my hand and I was just like, look at Wilkes, like just focus on him. He's cute. And it wasn't scary at all. Like that was something I was nervous about going into it, but there are worse things. I mean, I feel the same way going into any kind of gynecologist appointment. It's not exciting stuff, but it wasn't bad at all. And delivering the placenta was effortless. It was not hard at all, especially after you have a baby come through, something soft and malleable and not bony. It was really easy to deliver. And then my recovery was great. I was really grateful to be able to walk around and feel comfortable. And I don't know. Do you have any questions about any of that?
Was there anything after Wilkes was born that you did that maybe somebody has pointed out, like if you've told this story to other people that somebody pointed out was like, oh, that was interesting. Like, did you do anything like maybe out of the ordinary, so to speak, as far as like right after Wilkes was born? Were you able to like hold him a long time or?
Well, I requested immediate skin to skin. I didn't want him to be taken from me, and they were great with that. We held off on anything or tried to not do any of the things that would interfere with that. With Ollie's birth, Princeton doesn't believe in giving baths within the first 24 hours because they've seen research shows that they're better nursers if you wait at the 24-hour mark. When I was at Brookwood with Wilkes, they didn't believe that, and so they would have bathed them. So I had to say, no, I'd like to bathe him myself in the time that I would like to. So yeah, we didn't give his first bath until a while later. And we were able to do it ourselves.
And again, that was like a decision, I'm assuming, that you made ahead of time as part of your birth plan. So it wasn't even anything, I'm assuming that like it wasn't something you even had to like have the mental capacity to make that decision at that time, because that was something you had already looked into and like had already made that decision. Or did you make it in the moment?
We kind of we had it on the birth plan, but it depends on how your hospital or your birthplace takes birth plans, like as far as how much they respect them. I guess my birth plan didn't get passed on to the NICU nurse or whatever, not NICU nurse, but just baby nurse. And so she was all ready to do everything that she wanted, that she typically did. And so we had to say, wait, read the birth plan. This is what we want to do. And it wasn't like a big thing at all. She was like, oh, sure. Yeah, whatever. Do what you want to do. But it wasn't something that they were like, read the birth plan. This is so important. And then at Princeton, they had like typed in the computer and things. So it just depends on where you are. But, and I would just say, just depending on where you are, you can choose what level of support you need to bring in, and what level of support you have there. But anyways, with Ollie's birth, we got Princeton, I had a midwife. Pregnancy was good. With his birth, my water broke first before contractions started. I knew that doctors across just in general have different point of views on how to handle that. Sometimes they will only let you go 12 hours after your water breaks before they want to do a C-section. Sometimes they'll say 24-hour mark, we're going to talk about other ways to have this baby. And then I knew that specifically this hospital and the doctor and the midwife that I was under had let somebody go 36 hours and then they deliver naturally, as long as they were taking their temperature and making sure there was no infection for mom or baby. So I fully trusted the way that they handled that type of situation. And I really, the way the way I tell expecting moms to choose your birthplace is to look at how they handle like worst case scenarios and how they handle, because you can kind of have a natural birth successfully anywhere as long as you're complication free. But if there's something a little off, or like if your water breaks first, you would want to know how they handle those decisions. Like, is it how far over your due date are you willing to let me go, or how far over my due date are you willing to let me go? At that point, how do you handle that? Is it how do you handle induction? Even the way that Princeton handled induction was a slow process. I knew that they tried to naturally induce first, and they were just they just handled it very differently. So I would say when you're choosing the place of birth or your doctor, look at how they handle just difficult situations, and then see how you trust, or see if you trust the way that they would handle your worst case scenario. But yeah, so my water broke, and so I didn't have fear, but I definitely knew that if I were anywhere else or with any other care, that I would be put on basically a timeline of, we need to have this baby in these many hours. But I felt confident, even though that's not something we had discussed. I knew that, just like I said, I had read a testimonial about a mom having had that experience and trusted that it would be fine. And so my water broke, but my contractions didn't start immediately, but they did a little while later. That was a little bit of like a sit and wait. As soon as my water broke, my husband jumped out of bed. It was at 2 p.m. We just got back from church, and we were just laying around talking to Wilkes. And my husband jumped out of bed and was like ready to go, a lot like baby number one. But he was so ready to go right then, especially since we were an hour away this time. And so we called my parents, Wilkes got picked up. We just kind of relaxed to the extent that Andrew could relax. And I got to the point where I was like, we're not going to be able to relax in the way that we want to relax until you're at the hospital. And I knew that. So I was like, let's go. Earlier than I would have wanted to if it were just myself. But it was important for me to have Andrew really comfortable, because he wasn't going to let me just do my thing, knowing that we had an hour to drive. So I made the decision to, for us both to be comfortable, because I knew I'd be comfortable whether I was at home or at the hospital. So it was really wonderful. The hour drive was wonderful. If you're in a place of trying to decide where to birth, and the place that's ideal is an hour away, just choose that place. It's easy. We had music going. We took communion. We prayed. It was just a really, really sweet hour, and the contractions were doable. And for an hour, if your contractions are like 10 minutes apart at that time, that's 6 contractions. Or if they're 5 minutes apart, that's 12. It's doable. You can do it. And so we got there, checked in. Let's see, I'm mixing up births now. We got in, where am I? I'm thinking about my first hospital. Let's see, we got there. Okay, we got there. I met my sister. She lives in Birmingham. She was going to be my person just waiting there, praying for me. I wanted like a presence there. And then my friend who was there as a labor and delivery nurse for my first birth, she was going to be there as support. And she ended up not being there.
That's because your mom was there for when you had Wilkes, but then she was watching Wilkes when you had Ollie.
So I had my mom, which when I had Wilkes, she was I said, I just want you to kind of be on call. Like, I have no idea if I would be comfortable having anybody, or if, like I said, like modesty apparently is, I don't feel modest, but I guess I am. And so I was like, I don't know if I'm going to want my mom there, but I think they asked me around like 8 centimeters when I was pregnant or in labor with Wilkes, and I said, yeah, I would love her to be there. And I wanted her to have that experience of watching her grandchild be born. But anyway, second time around, my parents were keeping Wilkes. I did want support, and so I had my friend Sheena come. She took photos and videos, and she was going to be the one note-taking. But halfway through the time that I was there, her son had the flu at home, so she left. And really, it was totally fine because we were able to just be by ourselves. And I had kind of told her too, I don't know if I want you there in the room the whole time. I may want you there sometimes, and then I may want sometime just me and Andrew. Andrew and I just wanted that to be just a place for us. And so the lights were off and we were by ourselves, and it was really, really sweet. And like I said, first time with Wilkes, I had nurses in there all the time, even though they weren't really attentive. And I was able to have just my support group. Second time around, they were fine with just us being by ourselves and just call them when we needed them. I love that. It was so sweet. So if that's something that you would prefer, let them know. And I let them know as soon as we checked in the hospital that I would love to just kind of be let alone as much as possible. Let's see. So we got in at like 7 p.m. Like I said, my water broke at 2. I think we got there around 7. We just took it easy. And I know Shayna left around midnight, and my sister left around midnight to go home and sleep. And then, so we were alone, and it was really relaxed. And then I think around 2:30 is when I started to push or get ready to push. And I just remember my midwife being there, just kind of like she was sitting and just kind of just sitting back, relaxed, and just watching. And I just loved like her presence there, not rushing me. She was just kind of there waiting, kind of reading my body language, seeing how I was feeling. And I just kind of, I don't know, had him at 3:33 a.m. And the hardest part of his birth and labor was not going to sleep afterwards. So that was hard to want to go to sleep. I remember holding him and being like, he's so sweet, but I'm falling asleep. And they didn't wheel me into my room until like 6, because it just like the process of cleaning you up and all that afterwards is like an hour to 2 hour thing sometimes. And so that took a while, and I wanted to sleep so bad. I think we slept once we got into the postpartum room, but yeah. But that, I don't know. Do you have any questions about Ollie's birth? I don't really have any. It was, I feel like my faith grew from one to the next. I knew that I could do it. But like I said, you almost feel like you're doing it all over again for the first time, because you're like, can I do this again? But there were things that I confidently, like I had a lot more confidence on decisions that I was making. Like I was like, I'm having a natural birth. Thank you. I am, I'm choosing to do this or to do that, or I don't want to do that. And I just was able to be confident with my decisions. And that made all the difference. Like it was just, I wish I could have had the confidence with my second birth that I had, or I wish I would have had the same confidence I had with my second birth in my first birth. But you can't just gain confidence without experience sometimes. So I took experience to get me there.
So we did have one question. We have a couple questions come in, but I know you were talking about like things that you did to like, that Andrew was really supportive, and you kind of like gave him things that he could be doing, whether it was like physically supporting you, things he could tell you, things he could pray over you. So can you elaborate a little bit more on maybe that process? Did you was this like just things that you kind of came up with on your own and like had conversations with him about it? Did it, because I know that was one of the things that I feel like really stuck out to me is that, and I know I've seen, some of your birth photos, and like he was so supportive. And I've talked to a lot of moms that that's not really their experience with how their husband handled birth, like whether it was they just like couldn't stomach handle it, they were fearful even though the mom wasn't. Like, what are some things that, do you have any like practical tips that you could say as far as how you took like maybe handling, somebody who does tend to be nervous or tends to like need a certain atmosphere to feel relaxed? And like, what were the things that you did in advance that maybe somebody else watching who like might be nervous about that, or might be just like, how do I make my husband feel as calm as I do about this experience? Because if he's not calm, it's really not going to help me stay calm. So like, can you elaborate maybe a little bit more on that?
So before I talk about preparing Andrew, I think it's really important to mention preparing yourself for not having unrealistic expectations of your partner. I know Andrew, and I want to have grace for what he's capable of doing. Like if somebody really can't stomach just blood, like that's okay. That is like, just have grace for that. But I prepared my heart for not having unrealistic expectations for this like superhero dad that Andrew was going to be, out of his comfort zone that he wouldn't normally have been like in any other, like I knew that I didn't want to have that as a block for being able to enjoy this experience with him, only because I have unrealistic expectations of what his role is going to be. So just have grace and understand and meet your husband where he is, and just talk about those expectations beforehand, healthy communication in that way, and say like, these are the things that I would love, and be like very crystal clear, and no trying to make them read between the lines. Be very clear about the spiritual, emotional, or physical support you need, and then let them be clear about what their fears and their concerns are, or whatever, and then just come to a place of what you want in this is unity together, because that's only going to make your birth better, and not have something that's in between you guys in your birth because you have expectations that they're not able to meet. So I think that's the first thing that I want to say, because after we had Wilkes, the number one thing that was a conflict between Andrew and I was my expectations of him as a new dad, and he took a while to understand his role and be confident in his role as a new dad, and I didn't have as much grace as I should have had. Second time around, he is a very confident dad, and a very different person in that area. But I think the unrealistic expectations that I had, and that was just in newborn season, the feeling of like me getting up and having to nurse every 2 hours or whatever, and I was just feeling like overwhelmed, and he couldn't meet those. I mean, he couldn't even help in the ways that I needed or wanted him to. But that was our biggest conflict after having a baby, and thankfully I didn't have that during the birth. But all that to say, go into it with grace for your partner. Go into it with grace and clear expectations and clear communication. But things that I did to prepare Andrew was typing out a list of things that would be helpful to encourage me. He knows like my love language. He knows my just what like personality types and that type of thing. Those do come out in your birth, even though some things surprised me. Mostly I was who I was like in my birth experience too. Like if you're an introverted person, you're likely to have a birth that is representative of that. If you're extroverted, you might want to have a ton of support there, or you might want to have your mother-in-law and your dad, whatever. Like it might look totally different, but every birth is going to be different based on your different personalities and your different needs. So Andrew understands my personality type. He knows my love language. He knows the things that mean things to me. And I had a list of things that I wanted to remember to do that if I was in the moment not remembering because I was like totally overwhelmed with about to have a baby. I had a list of those things too. So like I wanted to remember to journal. And if I didn't remember to do that on my own, I wanted him to prompt that. I wanted to remember to be hydrated. I wanted to remember to do some videos here and there. I remember when I was like 9 centimeters, we pulled out the video camera, and I even like touched up my makeup and hair at some point. And I wanted to remember those type of things, like to just, if I needed to be freshened up, like if I need like to reapply deodorant or something like that, like I made it very clear for him and easy, and have a checklist because that's something that he does well with. And because we'd both be thinking about other things. And so if you have a doula, that's really helpful to give that list to them as well. And I think going ahead and depending on the support that you have, whether it's your mom, your husband, or your doula, communicating those expectations and kind of knowing the roles going into it. You may not know what role everyone has going into it because it might shift. Like I said, I didn't know if I was even going to have my mom there to begin with. And so that shifted. That was something I was surprised about. But kind of knowing ahead of time, like, I want my doula to be the one supporting me physically, rubbing my back, and that type of thing. And then I want my husband to be in my ear. Or for when I've supported other friends, they wanted a female presence and a female support to be the one to pray and to kind of set the atmosphere, and then let their husband be the ones rubbing their backs. I've supported 2 friends of mine in their birth, both times I really feel like creating an atmosphere. I had worship music on, I had declarations, I had scripture, I had different things, and it kind of had this flow that we went in that was really beautiful each time that I supported my friends, and I just love it, being invited into that experience with them. But kind of knowing the roles and kind of giving those positions to whoever is there ahead of time, but also just being willing to just know that, like, flexibility, you might be flexible with that. But yeah, so.
I like that you shared that. I know that's a big part of like any type of, like, when you're even like creating your birth plan or your birth vision, like whatever you want to call it. I like that you mentioned that you created like ways that you were preparing, but there was like an element of flexibility to them where it was like you were giving yourself room for, like, I think I'm going to want this, but I'm understanding that I might not. And so if I don't, that doesn't mean that I'm not following my plan. It just means that I've given myself room for, I've never done this before and I don't know what it's going to be like, or it might not be the same the second time as it was the first. Mm-hmm. And you gave yourself room for, I thought I was going to want this playlist and I don't want anything on, you know what I mean? And you gave yourself room, and it didn't mean that you weren't, because I think a lot of people can make a plan, and if they don't stick to the plan, then they, everything else tends to fall apart, and they feel like maybe I'm not prepared at all. Yeah. When it really, like, you just give yourself grace. It's something so little as far as, what you chose to listen to or who you wanted in the room last minute, and letting that be okay. I think that's really important.
And I think going into the bigger things, like preparing your heart for if things don't go the way that you plan, as far as if you wanted to have a natural birth, or say you didn't want to have a natural birth, but you wanted to have a vaginal birth and it didn't turn out that way. I think it's really important to come to a place of surrender before you enter birth season, or as you get closer to your due date, preparing your heart for what does it look like to have a induced labor in a way that I will still feel really confident with my decision or my doctor's decision and the way that we do that. And what does it mean for me to feel really confident with C-section if that's something that's necessary for my child to be born healthy and whole, and for me to be healthy. So I think one of my friends that I was there for her birth, she went 24 hours naturally, 24 hours with an epidural, and ended in a C-section. And it was difficult for her to go from having a natural birth to even choosing the epidural, and then choosing to get Pitocin, and then ultimately choosing to have a C-section. But each time that she had to surrender those desires in her original birth plan, we met face to face. It was her husband, and I, and we just waited until we got to a place that she felt confident and wasn't going to be beat down by the plan went different than she had expected. So when she chose to get the epidural, after 24 hours, we were like, look, this is not failure. This is just because your plans changed. It doesn't mean that you failed and that you can't do this. Let's get to a place of you feeling really confident and just trusting that this has to happen for your child to be born, and it had nothing to do with your ability. And let's get to that place of just fully trusting that this next decision is the best decision, and not to let it be something that was going to come up, postpartum and cause feelings of failure. And so then when she finally made the decision for a C-section, she went rolling into that room with a smile on her face, feeling confident that that was what had to happen. Like that just was necessary. And really, we had done everything possible up to that point. So she had every reason to feel that it was just necessary, because they went 48 hours trying to get her there. And we're so supportive the whole way through. But I think that's really important to go into birth knowing that that you need that support, that you need that surrender to prepare your heart, because those are the moments that you want support, the really hard moments, the moments where things look differently than you thought they were going to look, whether it's that you wanted to have a natural birth that was pain-free and it feels not pain-free, and you have to keep having that voice in your ear from your husband or your doula to remind you that you can do this and that you can believe that this is possible. And whether it looks like that, or we had to go the out of induction or C-section, or things just went way different than what your plan was, that support that's why you need that support for those moments. And it's important. And preparing yourself, preparing your support in advance is worth every bit of effort that goes into it. But so is the surrender part. Well, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, it's really good. I do. I just have a couple more. So Mary had asked if we missed the first part, can we re-listen? Yes. So Mary, at the end of this broadcast, it just takes a few minutes and then it just becomes a replay. So you'll click, if you registered, you got an email with a link, so you can watch it at this link at any time. I'll also put it on my website at theconfidentmomcast.com. And if you download the free iOS app called Crowdcast and follow the channel at Tiffany Farley, you'll have basically like an archive of all the Momcast recordings. So yes, there will be a replay. So we did a couple questions. The first question came from Lauren. Lauren is actually going to be joining us on the Confident Momcast soon. She's an incredibly talented birth photographer. So we're going to be talking about birth photography and just her experience doing that. So she said that she heard you mention about, taking some time during your pregnancy to like do, and even before pregnancy to educate yourself, to read a lot of books. Do you have any, she wanted to know, like, if you would mention any of the like books that you read, any like top, I know we mentioned Supernatural Childbirth, but would there be any other books that for those listening that are like, okay, I will start reading, I'll start educating, what books should they get? And if you don't know them, I can get them from you and make them available in the group as well, if that's easier.
I know that I read Ina May's childbirth book. I don't remember the title, but Ina May's childbirth book will take you there. We read Active Birth, although I had a very not active birth. I was surprised how much I wanted to lay in the bed after I read that book. And I was like, I wasn't up walking around at all. And then Andrew read, or I got the book Birth Partner, and Andrew read several chapters out of it. And so those were helpful to be encouraged by. I also watched some Netflix, what is it called? The Business of Being Born. Yeah. Anything encouraging that I could find online, but really like testimonials from people. I loved like meeting up and talking with my friends like I said, I think it was maybe 2 friends that I talked with. But I do remember like emailing people, just let me just talk to you for just a minute. And even I remember seeing somebody at a baby shower and just saying, before you leave the baby shower, like, can you just tell me, like, can I do it? And just getting that kind of encouragement was really great. Like I said, we just are in a place that I don't know anybody personally. I had to find people. I was the first of a friend group to have natural births, and I think I've had a handful that have tried and succeeded to have natural births. But at the time when I had Wilkes, I didn't know anybody else. Personally, I had to find them.
Yeah.
So that was how I prepared.
Your birth was the first, like, I mean, I hadn't really like dive deep into birth education, but your birth with Wilkes was the first time that I had ever heard it shared in such a positive and encouraging and fear-free way that it like opened my eyes to like, and then it's like, once I knew that that was a possibility, that like, oh, birth doesn't have to be like what you see in the movies, or, you know what I mean? This big, like terrible thing. It can actually, like, there are other stories, because, you know, always the negative is always, you know, always the loudest. And so, like, just hearing your story opened up like a world of education where I was like, it made me like want to learn more and fill myself with more of, you know, positive stories and things like that.
So great people who shared the positives, because that was what that built my faith and allowed me to believe that that was possible. So I'm so grateful for the people.
Yeah, for sure. I think it'll also be like with Lauren, with your question about the books, I think that's going to be a question we end up asking every guest. So I think what I'm going to do is like start making like a reading recommendation list on books that people have said are not based on fear. And with every pregnancy book, you're going to take things and leave things, and, you know, and things like that. There'll be things that will be, you know, I've heard a lot of books will be like, I loved this book, I didn't really agree with this chapter, but everything else really helped me. So it won't be like a 100%, you know, stand by everything, but that's kind of the point of one of the missions of doing this, is just presenting different opinions and different perspectives and kind of giving you the education so you can make your own decisions. We had one more question on here. Let's see. She said, what kind of encouragement or advice would you give to someone who is already fearful of giving birth, but finds so much negative through social media or traumatizing stories of birth that it continues to hold them back from getting pregnant? Do you have anything? That's kind of a deep question. Do you have anything to share about that?
So the fear is holding back from pregnancy.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm understanding, because like everything they hear about birth is something traumatizing, that it's actually like they feel like that fear of what will happen is actually keeping them from getting pregnant in the first place.
Yeah, I had friends who feared having children because they feared losing the child. I've had friends who've lost their babies. You know, I think, like I said, there's so many opportunities for fear. It's unlimited of what you can just choose to have fear about. I would say helpful things for getting over fear. You know, like I said, like those are the books that I read to make me feel confident about birth specifically, but I didn't just prepare in the birth genre. It was also like spiritual preparation for listening or reading things that had to do with fear. So whether it's books that people have overcome fear, or like I listen to sermons, or going to a counselor and having somebody help you walk through that, like fight that, like do everything in your power to get rid of that, because it doesn't belong. It's not, you don't have to have that. And man, it just makes me so mad to think that there are people that are overcome with fear that's holding you back from having a sweet little baby. And I totally understand where you are. But man, I want that freedom for you. So, yeah, I think just do everything. I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing, to be in a place of understanding that you need to overcome that fear. And that's just an open invitation to have that freedom in your pregnancy. and your birth and your motherhood experience will be so much more full because you've overcome it and you've done the really hard work up at this point. So thank you for just even confessing that and asking for help even just in this moment, because you'll be able to overcome that and be able to have that testimony of, I've overcome this crazy fear and now I can do anything. Like, and you won't have that in your pregnancy and your delivery and your motherhood experience, because like I said, like, fear doesn't end with just delivery. Like, there's so much opportunity through just being a mother, like whether it's fearing SIDS or fearing sickness or fearing your child going to kindergarten and getting picked on, or fearing your child driving his first car, or fearing who he's going to marry. Like, it doesn't end. So just overcoming that fear from the get-go is such a good thing. And there's so much potential for freedom before you even jump into the season. So that's such a good thing for you to realize it and seek help. And I would be happy to help you actually personally walk through that freedom from that fear. So if there's anybody here, I know Tiffany as well would love to offer help in that area, because I've overcome things and I've definitely overcome fear. And also I've seen the negatives of fear overcoming somebody when they haven't dealt with it. So definitely let us be people that are helping you walk through that or give you more resources in any way possible. We'll happily do that. So yeah, I hope that helped.
Yeah, I love that. I love the way that I know you talked about it earlier, but when you described it as like, there are so many opportunities for fear. So like, you have to just, instead of looking at it as like this one specific, I can't seem to stop being afraid about this, like, it's almost like you have to see fear as the bigger picture of like, there's never going to be a time where fear is going to stop trying to have a hold of you. So you just have to come to a place where you are making a decision that, because it could be anything. It could be, I don't want to leave my house because of this, this, and this. And there's so much about fear has to do with not seeing the truth about something and believing lies about something. And so if you can, the more you can, I feel like, communicate the fact that you're like, I feel afraid of this, but I'm going to decide not to be, like, that you can overcome that. And I like the way that that's like such a good way of describing it, that there are so many opportunities for fear. And so obviously, yeah.
I had a mentor that told me, and she was counseling me through just marriage things during a difficult season that Andrew and I had. But it totally relates to this too. But she was just reminding me, like, fear, and this has to do with things, marriage, this kind of thing. I mean, it has to do with pursuing dreams, whatever. Fear is the number one thing stopping you from going into your destiny. Like, it's the number one thing holding you back from getting there. And of course you see that in this, like, fear is the number one thing holding you back from a life being a life happening, a person's life. But fear can be the number one thing holding you back from being able to have the birth, and just having that kind of freedom. And so just, and like I said, like, this really applies to, like, pursuing dreams, like, just overcome that fear so you can have that freedom to walk into what was written for you and what is available for you. Because it'll just take over you and just have control over you if you let it. And you just have to, like Tiffany said, see it as a bigger picture, as a thing that is just conquer fear specifically, instead of thinking about conquering fear over, like, this one thing. It's conquering just fear in general.
Yeah, for sure. I don't see any more questions on here. Rylee, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your stories. I know they're so personal to share, but it's really like, I like love the content that's being shared here. And I love that, expecting moms and, women who are coming close to that season of, like, I think I want to start my family soon. And I'm just kind of more interested in this topic because we're getting closer. I think the content's really helpful because people, I think you should read books, and I think you should self-educate and watch documentaries and get all the education you need. But I think it's also really powerful to hear the personal experiences of others. And, we're going to have a lot of different kinds of birth stories on here. Really powerful to learn from that, and all from fear-free perspective, which I'm really passionate about. So I'm going to go ahead and say good night to everyone. If you're wanting to go back and watch the beginning, or if you've missed a part, or if you tuned in late, as I mentioned earlier, this link just becomes the replay. So just give it a few minutes after we end, and you should be able to go right back and watch us from the very beginning. So you can watch us here at this link at any time that was emailed to you. You can also access it at theconfidentmomcast.com. You can join the Facebook group by using the button below this video. It'll take you right to the Facebook group, and all the episodes are linked. You can also download the free app called Crowdcast. And there's instructions to download that app right in the Facebook group as well. So replays are available for you. That was a big, we wanted to do it live so that you could ask questions, but we also wanted to make it so that if you're, up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep, or if you're up nursing a baby and you're trying to stay awake, or if you're going for a long car ride, or if you're doing the dishes and you want to listen to something encouraging, that this will be available for you. So thank you, Rylee, for joining me. And I'll go ahead and say thanks everybody for tuning in live, and we'll see you next week.